and we'll clip that out, yeah.
You're listening to Widowed AF with
Rosie Gill-Moss
and Lucinda Boast.
We've invited some members of the world's most exclusive club to bravely share their stories.
Join us for some honest conversations about living a different life, the crushing lows, the surprising highs, and everything in between.
Please note this is a podcast about death. Carefully read the episode descriptions and be kind to yourself.
But for now, welcome to our podcast.
Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. We are thrilled that you're still listening to us. And actually on that note, I am going to be a bit of a fortune teller today. I'm going to say by the time this goes out on Friday, we will be over 5,000 downloads, which at the risk of blowing our own trumpets, no, actually I am going to blow our own trumpet. It is almost unheard of, a pair of unknown podcasters. So thank you so much for everybody that's been listening and downloading. If you continue to recommend us, we will continue to grow and then we can continue to do this. So thank you very much.
Wow, 5,000 downloads, that's incredible, considering the likes of my dad didn't even know what a podcast was when this whole thing started. And
yeah, we have popped my dad's podcast cherry too, actually. Yes, we're getting the other ones listening. Yeah, it is. And I just think, God, like the validation that what we're doing is worthwhile is really lovely. So thank you, everybody. I know we gush like this every episode, but we just can't quite believe that people want to listen to us, really, can we?
I know, that's it. And this podcast, I know we say initially this is a podcast about death, but actually as the weeks have gone on and we've spoken to people, we're sharing love stories as well, aren't we? Stories of people's lives, of their happiness together before the tragedy came along. And it's been so lovely to do that.
Yeah, and also what we're doing is it is about death, but it's also about life, because these people are choosing to grab life by the balls and live. So it's also a story about life. And I think people are really impacted by how courageous and resilient these people are. And I do say the word resilient a lot. I do apologise.
No, they really are. And during what they've been through, Rose and I said at the start that what we wanted to do was show people that life goes on. We're a few years down the line now, and we want to show people that we're living happy lives, that life goes on around our grief, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also saying that on the cusp of 5 years, the 5-year anniversary of Ben's death is in March. And it's really, I don't know, like this kind of grief gremlin is back and I'm crying a lot. And I just feel like it's all bubbling under the surface again. And you think by this point in your journey that you would be starting to, I don't know, that it wouldn't hurt as much. And I guess it still does. It still hurts. And with kind of visceral pain, as we tell you just have to live with it, don't you? It's not going anywhere. And it's a kind of another of my little therapy type expressions, but you have to get yourself to the point where you are strong enough to carry the weight of your grief. And once you are there, then you can coexist with it. But yeah, it's not easy. It really isn't. A bit of blubbing in the street and that sort of thing going on, it's been a long time. Otherwise, things are great.
Absolutely. We want to normalise the fact that even after 10 years,
yeah,
still going to have, my dad, for example, lost my mum 18 years ago this year. He still has a cry. He came over for a cup of tea the other day. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, but he still has a cry over my mum. So we're all going to do it.
Your dad was saying actually that he's really enjoyed the podcast and it's made him open up a little bit about when your mum died, and it's made you reevaluate how you felt about him at the time and things like that, hasn't it?
It has, because actually at the time I watched my dad, I was with my mum when he died, and watching him retreat out of the door of the hospice and return home on his own, a shell of a man, I became quite judgmental over him. I was in a happy relationship at the time. And watching my dad just give up on himself, go in our family home, for instance, he just set himself up on this beaten up old leather sofa. He started smoking again. He'd be smoking fag after fag, crying. People would be coming to the house. And I thought, come on, Dad, get on. And then he leapt into life, started saying yes to things. And that's, John actually spoke about that.
Mm-hmm.
So when he said, I'm going to say yes to fun, I'm going to go abroad to Ibiza. My dad did all of that. He bought debenture seats at the Oval in London and went to all the cricket games.
I thought you were going to say your dad went to Ibiza then, which is not fitting with the man that I know. But
I think, do you know what? I think he might have done at some point. He had a lot. He had a lot
of cowboy hat.
And actually, I stayed with him for a few days, and it was like living with a student, and I was ever so judgmental of him. Now, he said the other day to me that he's reflecting on those early days, and he said, did I do it wrong? What did I get it wrong? I feel guilty that I threw myself into things in the way that I did. I remember seeing Dad's calendar, and it was just full of
Yeah.
stuff. He'd stopped working, and it was just full of social stuff. And I get it now. It's only now that I do get it.
Yeah, my mum said to me, because they were living with me in the early days, and she just said, you need to slow down. You're so busy. You can't keep going at this pace. And I just remember saying, Mum, if I slow down, I won't get back up again. Like, I have to just keep going. And I think it's so common, isn't it, that you just keep yourself so busy. And again, all the different coping strategies, but sometimes it is just keeping yourself busy. And I love this idea of saying yes to everything and embracing life, but you can go too far, can't you? And leave yourself actually with no time to process what's happened.
You can, but you've just lost your person. And, anyone that's listened to Antony's episode on Monday that's just gone, I still get wobbly talking about it, actually, because Antony supported his husband through mental illness from the start of their relationship. It was always a thing. His husband made an attempt on his life only after 6 months of them being together. It didn't mean that they weren't happy together. They truly loved each other. And have a look at our social media and the pictures of them together. Yeah. That they're a couple so in love in spite of that horrible illness.
Yeah, and it really came across to me during that episode how many similarities there are when you're caring for somebody with really profound mental illness, like Andrew had. How similar in many ways it is to living with somebody who's had a terminal diagnosis or a really debilitating illness, and you're living under that cloud all the time. It culminates with this horrendous ending to their life, but in the time leading up to it, you're always under that cloud, and it must be it's just so terrifying. It really must.
It really was. That came across in the way that Antony spoke about that journey back from the station when he knew that Andrew had taken his life, and he knew he would have to make that journey one day. And he went straight from that into dealing with ambulance service, police, coroners. You've just lost the other half of your soul, and suddenly you're not a human anymore. You're a part in a process.
Yeah, you're a cog in a wheel, aren't you? And talk about leaflets. You're handing somebody a leaflet and then saying it's not really appropriate for you. Just feels like, why? Like, you just
give him a bloody hug, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and I think it almost makes you feel more of, I talk a lot about that kind of freaky feeling of being weird and different. And if they say, we have a leaflet about grief, but it's not really for you, and it's almost going because you're different, your grief is different. And this is relating to the suicide aspect of it as well. Why is there not a leaflet that relates to that? It can't be. People must need this.
That was shocking. And also the support for Antony as a gay person. All the literature out there, the government website that talks about bereavement, for instance, heavily. The language used is male and female, isn't it? It's a heterosexual relationship.
It feels like everything's designed for a world 50 years ago, doesn't it? That it hasn't moved, even with this additional payment that widows can now apply for if they had children. And actually, if anybody listening who is a widow and hasn't applied for this, if you were bereaved, I believe it's after 2018, I should have written this down, sorry, you are now able to apply for some extra funding if you had children with your partner. You used to have to be married, and you no longer have to be married. And it was an archaic rule, but it has changed, and you can apply, and it's very quick, and the money lands very speedily in your bank account, I've heard. So get on it if you haven't already, Wids.
No, absolutely. I think it was after 2017, and the payments will be backdated as well. So, a little cash injection, goodness me, we're not getting our partner's income or their pensions, but anything we can get is going to help us.
Yeah, and it's from their national insurance payments, I believe, as well. So you are entitled to it, so you really must get it. And thank you for actually having the correct information, Lily. That's why there's two of us today.
Oh, but no, Antony's story was amazing. And I also drew comparisons with Jess's interview, because Jess's love for Jason and for Tom, in spite of what happened to both of them, was so clear when she said, I would have always loved him. I would have always married him. I would have always had kids with him. Yeah. And she would always love Tom too. And that wouldn't change, even if someone had said they're going to die in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, there's a very cheesy lyric from the Whitney Houston song, and it's "The ride with you was worth the fall, my friend." And I like that because it's how I feel, that no matter how devastating and horrific the fall was, the time that I had with Ben was worth it.
Yeah, I would love to feel that way, but yeah, that's something I struggle with, obviously, for reasons that are very clear in episode 2 of our podcast.
Yeah, go back and listen if you haven't. But I think that's quite, in a way, it gives the conversations that we can have little bit more kind of weight, because we come from different sides and we're able to empathise with different aspects of people's grief. And I do think it's quite helpful to have different perspectives in this, because not everybody has very straightforward grief. Lots of people find out things about their partner after they've gone. Often they've died in ways that are horrific or surprising. So yeah, the complex grief is it's a very common feature of grief. So it is something that I'm glad that we have somebody qualified in inverted commas to talk on it.
Yeah. And things like when Antony was talking about dealing with the coroners and the police and that dehumanising process, I was bouncing up and down in my chair, because I could have said it exactly as he did. That first phone call to the coroner's office, the call that they made to me after John's post-mortem saying, did I want the samples from his body back? No, I don't really want
Thanks.
for my husband's brain. Thanks all the same. And them expecting us to just know what the process is going to be. And that process being so foreign to everybody. Who would you turn to if someone died of suicide, a loved one? What would you do? Who would you ring first?
Yeah.
Who would be able to actually guide you in what to do? And that whole process was so alien to Antony, and he must have been so alone.
Yeah, he spoke so beautifully about what must have been just the most horrific time, and I'm really grateful to him for doing that. So I know we thanked him profusely. I think I made actually quite the show of myself by how much I told him I loved him, but it still stands.
Absolutely. And Antony also spoke about the support system that he had, and which is not necessarily always through your family, is it? And he talked about the difficulties that developed in his family following Andrew's death, and the way that kind of went, which it's shocking what someone's death does to the people around them.
Oh God, yeah.
Turns them into, and we've spoken about some of the experiences we've been through with people you expected to have support from, and they just do a massive shit on you, basically.
Yeah, eloquently put, Lou. Really nice.
Always.
We'll cut that one, shall we, for Instagram? We'll quote that up.
Absolutely.
But no, you're right. It's often you find the people that you expect to be there for you aren't, and the people that you didn't expect are. And some of the people that were there for me in the early days it was really unexpected, and it was so welcome, and I'm very grateful. And we are, I think, going to possibly do an episode where we really talk about what to do and how to support those people who are grieving. And actually, we will start to collect ideas from people. So I'm going to just shamelessly remind you all that we do have a voice note feature on our website. You can leave us a voice note. I think, do we have it on Instagram as well, Lou?
Yes, we do. There's a button on Instagram now.
So you can leave us a little voice note. And actually, I'm going to play right now Steph Mayhill's little voice clip, because she popped our voice clip cherry. Thank you, Steph.
Hi, girls. Just listened to episode 8 of your podcast while walking my little puppy, and I heard your bit about leaving a voice note. So here I am. It's Steph Mayhill. I have applied to be a guest, so hopefully get to chat to you soon. But I just had a burning question. I tend to refer to this whole journey, situation, whatever you want to call it, as a shit show. I tend to say it's just shit when people ask how I am or what I'm doing. But yeah, my family know that I refer to this as a shit show. So I just wonder if anybody else refers to their experience as something and what it was. But yeah, mine is the shit show. So yeah, there we go. So yeah, speak to you soon. Bye.
Good on you, Steph.
Steph. Thank you very much. I very much like the phrase the shit show, and I'm sure I've banded it around, and I certainly know you have, Lucinda.
Oh God, yeah.
I think back in the early days, I did call it the eye of the storm, and I felt that I was just in the midst of it, and I couldn't see, I couldn't think, everything was crazy, and then gradually started to step back. And I think I refer to it now as the early days.
Me too.
Yeah, there's less vitriol and agony when I think back to it. And don't get me wrong, it still stings, but I look back on it as the early days because I can now see the progress that I've made since then. And I think that's why I find it very unsettling when I get hurtled back into the very painful grief, because it's a really scary reminder of how terrible it was and just how horrific getting back out of it was. But maybe it's healthy to have that reminder every now and then, just to remember how far you've come.
I think so. And I don't know how far along Steph is in her journey, but I can relate to that specific period of time where you are in the shitstorm, eye of the storm. Yeah, I can relate to that. I don't know when for me that time came to an end. It did though, because I'm not in it now, but I don't know when it finished. I think it just naturally does over time, and you start looking back on it as a past thing instead. I lovingly refer to it now as my fried chicken and wine days. Where I just cry into my fried chicken and my wine. And I'm not doing that anymore. I can't remember when it stopped, but it stopped and I'm living a different life now. Yeah, it doesn't define you, but the grief does still crop up.
Yeah, and it's a funny one, isn't it? We try and say to the children, or the ethos we want for them is that what happened to them is something really terrible, but it's a terrible thing that happened to them and it does not define who they are. And it's trying to make sure that the magnitude of it is not forgotten, but also that it doesn't become this cloud over them that follows them throughout their entire lives. So to be the child whose dad died or the child whose mum died, they don't want to carry that cloak with them the whole time. It's a heavy weight to bear, that.
It is. And actually, as the child, I was 23, but as the child of someone whose parent died and watching the other parent kind of carrying on, equally, I don't know when my dad's kind of grief is still there, very much just underneath the surface, but I don't know when he would say he moved forward with his life.
He's very much the generation that don't talk about it as well. And what we are seeing, and again, it's something I've said over and over again, so I do repeat myself, you'll discover that, is that talking about it sheds that kind of heavy blanket of pain and it just frees you. And I'm sure John won't mind me saying this, but this weekend we're going up to Whitby, which was one of Sarah, his first wife's most favourite places, and him and Holly are going to scatter her ashes there. And it's taken him nearly 5 years to be able to do this, to let her go. But since recording his episode, he feels in a place where he can let her go. So we've kept some back to make Holly a piece of jewellery, and we're going to bring back some of the Whitby sand for her to keep as well. I actually will probably let you all know how it goes next week, because this is something I've never done. And so we've had some quite mature and eloquent conversations with Holly about it. And I think it's time.
Holly actually said to me, she looked so excited about going up to Whitby and seeing her mum and dad's special place and her ashes. So it's a really positive thing. And I'm so proud of John for waiting until he was ready, because a lot of people try and dictate what you should do. Like my mother-in-law was on my case after my husband died, wanting to get hold of his ashes, to do something with them, to get some elaborate shrine made in her home. I wasn't ready. And the funeral director said to me, "We'll keep them for as long as you want. We'll keep them years if you want.
Yeah.
We'll do what you decide. You don't have to decide." And I was rushed into a decision. And I'm so glad that John didn't feel rushed into a decision and he waited until the right time.
Yeah, you can't really push John into a decision. I'd like to see somebody try, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Believe me, I've tried. Why do you think he proposed in the hospital? Get him while he's vulnerable, eh? Oh, anyway, moving swiftly on. We have got a very different episode coming out on Monday, and you can probably tell by the tone of my voice has changed, because this is I feel very goosebumpy and quite emotional about what we're going to do. We're going to bring you a letter from a woman whose husband went to Dignitas to end his own life, and it's a big deal, this letter. It's very powerful. So on Monday, it will be very different. Lulu will read this letter and then we will come back on Friday and discuss it. We are hoping to have a representative from the charity Dignity in Dying with us as well. So you'll be able to ask questions during the week and we will answer them. So yeah, I just wanted to make you aware that this was coming, because this is a very important episode and I do hope people will listen.
We're absolutely honoured to bring you this lady's story. She's so brave and so wonderful and so kind in allowing us to share it with you.
Yeah. So on that note, we will sign off. Thank you once again for listening to us witter on, and we will be back with you on Monday and then again the following Friday for another one of these. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening today. We'll be back with you soon for more from the front line of loss.
But for now, as you were.